Greetings! Welcome to the Devlog for experimental build 1 of update 110 of hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades. We're going to start off as always with a quick sound check. Make sure your speakers aren't up too high. Wonderful. So what have we got for you this week? Well, this is a bit of a small, just getting back into the swing of things, experimental build with a couple sort of little fixes that have been asked about, as well as some continued improvements for our animation system. The first thing that I want to show you that folks complained about with all of our recent AR-15 models is that you can now, in fact, toggle the iron sight for the M203, so this will no longer block you if you're using something really low profile to aim. So sorry about that. That was an oversight that I would have fixed it with the initial release, except it was just a little bit too late by the time I realized it was missing. The other thing that came this week is I have, thanks with more fresh ammo models from Stefan, I have replaced all of the ammunition models for all of our Revolver cartridges, which in a way is the most important set because of the fact that we rely on being able to see whether or not we have primer strikes on Revolver cartridges for reloading. So if we look at the back of them there, they are fresh. We can actually see the 44 mag on the back, which is one of the little detail touches that I just love with all of our replaced ammo. Take a few shots, then pop that cylinder open, and we can super evidently see the 3 rounds that are now fired. So now significantly easy to keep track of, and of course our spent shells have that wonderful dirty discoloration on them to differentiate them there from our unspent rounds. Just beautiful stuff. And obviously, replacing this many assets in the game takes a long while, so to retain sanity, especially because of how repetitive cartridge work can be, Stefan and I are basically slowly replacing all of the ammo cartridges in the game, one sort of subgroup at a time. So 357, 4440, 44 mag, 454 Castle, as well as our 4570 government and 45-110 sharps have all been replaced this week, and you'll notice, yeah, as I said, proper bullet shapes. Let me actually let's grab our ammo panel here, over here, because I just love the way some of these look. Let's just take 454 Castle here. So this still visually says flex tip because that's what the original set of rounds, but this is actually just a tracer in game. I know those are completely different things in real life. Long story behind that. We have our high grain. We have our penetrator. So yeah, so those are all in. Proper looking soft point now. Just beautiful, and just as I said, it's one of those things I said in a past devlog. A lot of the ammo models in H3, like if we just pull out, I don't know, under intermediate, if we just pull out one of our like 5.56 rounds, I modeled this in like the first couple weeks of H3 existing. A lot of these are not, in fact, perfectly dimensionally accurate. They're kind of poly wasteful, and because as I sort of added ammo types to the game, I always worked from the original base mesh, so all of the original sins that I committed in making these first ammo models ended up sort of spreading across the game's entire ammo collection for years, and so it feels really great, yeah, you belong on the floor, to finally get sort of more evenly, properly, efficiently modeled, better textured ammo that just has a more subtle and interesting finish and looks so good as a spent round. So yeah, whammo. So those are in there. Also with revolver ammo, some of you may have noticed that the performance out of fairly short barreled guns for a few of the ammo types, like 38 Special and 45 Long Colt maybe, there was one other that just, it seemed to underperform relative to what it should have been. That was an error in my sort of like, all ammo in H3 actually has this like power velocity relative to barrel length curve, and they are mostly correct, but a couple of them were wrong, and I fixed those in relationship to the revolver ammo. The last thing for this week, which I don't really have to talk about here, so let's jump out of VR. So yeah, out of VR, the last big thing for this experimental build is that I actually dove back into the Return of the Rotwieners mode for a little bit, primarily to alter a bunch of its equipment spawning code and pools. So basically any part of that mode where instead of being given a very specific weapon, like some of the rewards, where you're given like a pool of them, I have replaced those pools and the logic for them that originally were statically authored lists because of how long ago I coded them. It sort of predated the procedural pools that Taken Hold uses, which meant that basically most of the weapons in the game that sort of came out after Rotwieners could appear in the sort of later stores in the mode, but not in other parts of the mode's random generation. So that has been fixed. So anytime you sort of open a weapon case and would find a pistol, anytime you open a locker or break a wooden box open, as well as some of the NPC rewards that use pools, like all of the bolt action weapons in the starting town, now use Taken Hold style procedural pool generation. And what's nice about this is it doesn't just use a much wider selection of guns in the game, somewhere between like 2 and 5 times as many, but because it's doing it based on tags, if you have any sort of modded content loaded in the game that fits the filtration parameters of those pools, those weapons can now also show up in Return of the Rotwieners. So I know a whole bunch of you still play and enjoy that mode, and would enjoy the sort of added variety. So I made this change. It's been tested a little bit, but not super extensively. So those of you who play it, if you run into any issues like opening a case or something where you're like, oh, nothing came out of it, or the whole mode errors or something like that, I would appreciate a bug report, because I can always end up accidentally typoing something or not checking a box somewhere. That is the most complicated scene in the game by a lot, and it's easy for me to lose track of things in it. So yeah, so that is it. Oh, and the modern item spawner is in that scene now instead of the old one when you play with an enabled. Which, speaking of, one of my goals for the 110 cycle is to try to get the modern item spawner into as much of the rest of the game as possible. I would like to go ahead and do the big transition of it in Taken Hold, which will be a little scary because I have to edit the scene that mods use for Taken Hold. So I'm going to coordinate that with Nathan to make sure that it works, who's responsible for so much of the infrastructure of modding in H3. But yeah, so I'm going to get that in there. I'm going to get it into the breaching scene, which it isn't in, and a couple other places that it really needs to be replaced in. So it's a more delicate, with a sandbox scene, I can literally be like, select old item spawner, delete key, drag a new one in, Control S, save. It's that simple. But the various game modes that sort of have the item spawner in it are more complexly referenced. So I need to both sort of connect that, as well as just double check that it's a completely different object, it's a different system, and it's slightly different dimensions. So I need to make sure that things don't, explode when that substitution happens. But I want to finally do it so I can finally sort of mostly sunset the old item spawner. Obviously, there's still folks who sort of like have old mods that haven't updated correctly, so they don't show up in the new item spawner, or they have old vaulted items. So I'm not going to like nuke the old item spawner out of the game anytime soon. It will remain present in the indoor range at absolute minimum, probably proving ground as well too, given that that is functionally sort of a testing scene. So you'll still have access to it to be able to grab your old vaulted items. But definitely, if you haven't yet, maybe start like migrating. If you've got a bunch of stuff in the old item spawners vault, start moving it on over to the new one, because the transition will finally be happening. It has taken far too long. So cool. So as I said, yeah, not a huge update. I am still recovering from, basically I was traveling for all of April between going to Buffalo and then going to Europe for this conference, which was a wonderful time, but especially after basically spending the past 5 years like sitting in this room mostly, traveling to the other part of the globe was a little exhausting. Good, but very tiring. So it's taken me a little while to cycle back up to things, but I have already started getting back into work on our new take and hold level, and or rather the tile set that I'm going to use both for the new take and hold level as well as for some new sort of game planner oriented sandbox scenes. So some texture work got done on that as well while I was gone, which was excellent to see that progress. So expect to see more level stuff from me as our next month or so progresses. So I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see y'all soon. Peace.